Well. Here I was sitting down for a nice Italian sandwich for lunch. I take one bite out of my lunch and my phone starts going off. And now we're back. This is an addendum, a nerdendum on the front end of this week's
Nerdendum's good.
That's right. On the front end of this week's Nerder, because James Harden has opted in to the final year of his contract, and he and the 76ers are now looking for a trade. So, Seth Partnow, Mo Dakhil, I'm Dave DeFore. This is Nerder, she wrote. And guys, again, well, for the first time, because remember, everything else, guys, we're going to take you guys. We built a time machine for this episode. The rest of this episode happens in the past, in a time when James Harden hadn't opted in. So, okay, let's talk about this. Obviously, Harden wasn't going to get the max money that he was hoping to get. The Houston situation, which we talk about later in the episode, Houston situation didn't pan out for him. And now he's opted in, and he and the Sixers are going to work out this trade. And it seems as if the lead dogs in the race for James Harden are the LA Clippers and the New York Knicks. They're the two top destinations. The Miami Heat, their name is obviously out there as well, because they're going to be in on everyone right now. That's a team that's super close to winning a title. I mean, they were just in the finals. The Clippers one, it feels like the one that's probably going to happen.
It feels like the only one. The others don't matter. It just feels like they're the only one. Like, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into fake trades. We do talk about that. Me and Andrew Schleck went over some fake trades on the Daily Ding. If you're interested in fake trades, check that out. But that's not what we do. What I'm interested here is thinking about the future that envisions Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. Now, there's an argument here from the Clippers standpoint, because Harden is going to eat innings for you. Like regular season, like he can be out there, he can play. He's going to play, 70-something games. I mean, this is a guy who he stays healthy in the regular season. And their biggest problem is that their two best players just miss a ton of time all the time. So this gets them to the playoffs. But is this enough to put them over the top? Like, I mean, does this work? I mean, I understand Ty Lue and those guys don't really love to run any kind of coherent offense. James Harden at least gives them a little bit more of an identity.
Are we getting ahead of ourselves?
We are. Oh yeah, we're way ahead.
I mean, no, don't we have to get to the point of like, what does LA offer Philly to make it worth Philly's while to do this?
I mean, we could, but that's a little, that I don't know.
Okay.
That's different.
No, but so podcast. I mean, it's sort of I mean, is it? I mean, is this deal doable without Paul George going somewhere else? But that's, I mean, again, you don't want to do fake trades.
So, here's the thing. If the Clippers are making this move, they're not doing it to just have James Harden for Paul George. Like, I don't see that being the deal for them.
That new arena.
Hold on, but unless it's a situation where it's like Paul George is like, I absolutely need a 4-year max extension and things like that, and maybe that's reporting that comes down the line, Seth, then we can be like, oh, we did go too early. But I just don't see a scenario where the Clippers are entertaining this option to go James Harden and Kawhi Leonard pairing in that sense, right? Like, to be honest, I think this is an awful pairing for the trio. I think, yeah, James Harden and Paul George could probably work, but that doesn't help Kawhi Leonard. James Harden has not proven to be a really good spot up guy in the sense of him wanting to be a spot up guy, not the skill of it or the threat of him being a spot up guy. And Kawhi Leonard needs the ball in his hands. Like, it's not a scenario there where I just think the trio right there it's just a weird mix. And it's just going back to like, let's just get whatever name we can get. And if they're doing this, Dave, just for the arena to be relevant when the arena comes, they've lost the plot. They honestly have at this point.
Interesting aspect of this for me is that, unless I'm mistaken, like, Harden is not extension eligible if he gets traded. So there's a little bit of a
You're kicking the can to next summer if you're James Harden?
A little bit. So that's an interesting aspect of it too. The bit that I kind of wanted to hit on is that I don't think this has taken Philadelphia by surprise. And we talk later about Boston, and we would have liked it better if Boston had acquired Porzingis for Malcolm Brogdon instead of Marcus Smart. Um, I think it's pretty clear that Boston wasn't surprised by having to pivot, and they already had some stuff in play. And I think that Philly has gauged what's out there already for them, and they aren't being caught short, and they've already planned their offseason, like a scenario of their offseason, a contingency where Harden wants to be someplace else. My question is what does that look like for them? What are you hoping to get back? Are you doing a 3-team trade? How are you pivoting?
That's the thing for the Sixers. That's really the problem. And you're right, Seth. We've known about Harden might leave since December, where Houston was just the place we were always talking about. We never kind of entertained. This is almost better for the Sixers, at least in the sense of like him opting in allows them to trade him and get stuff back in that regard. But like, this doesn't feel like, if you're Philly, it's just like whatever the Clippers are off. If it's not Paul George, really, why are you talking to them? Like in all honesty, and I don't think the Clippers would do it if it is Paul George, but I think that's the deal there. So yeah, is it a 3rd-team trade? Is this and the Sixers have to be careful, man. Like they screwed this up. Is Embiid going to demand a trade? Like that's really the next question.
So, all right, I said I wasn't going to do fake trades. And all of a sudden now I'm like, okay, well, Andrew Schlecht had a great fake trade that had Dame going to Philly, Harden going to the Clippers, and then some stuff going to Portland, which if you're Philly, I mean, yeah, that's a heck of a pivot. But I mean, that feels unrealistic. I mean, 3-team trades are pretty unrealistic.
Well, but who has stuff? When we say stuff goes to Portland, what's the stuff? Because it doesn't seem to any of it's going to be good stuff.
Like, nobody has any picks. Although I would say, I don't know, are those Clippers, are later Clippers picks, are Philly picks, like in a couple years, are those valuable? Maybe.
I'm really Philly picks more than the Clipper picks because the Clippers are just going to spend money to not be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
My real question is, do they like how many picks are still going to OKC from the Clippers? How many are going from the Sixers to the Nets? Like it's not about whether the picks are good or how far back or whatnot. Do they have them?
Right. And Philly's got to be in win now mode. I mean, this is prime of Embiid's career.
I mean, this could turn around and Embiid could demand a trade real quick. The NBA, hey, life comes at you fast. This is the deal. And being an NBA fan is tough because literally 4 days ago was this scenario for a normal Sixers fan where holy crap, we're going to trade James Harden. And if we don't get a good return in that, is it out of the realm of possibility that Joel Embiid looks around and goes, I don't want to be here. This team's not going to be good enough. Well, and then Nick Nurse is like, what did I just step into?
I think this is an interesting kind of conversation here on what is a good return for James Harden. Okay. I mean, we just saw what Bradley Beal went for. I mean, obviously Bradley Beal's on 4-year deal, had a no trade clause. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why he didn't go for very much.
And
but
James
1 year of James Harden's better. He's older, but it's 1 year of James Harden. That's not a lot of security if you're a team trading for him. I mean, you could maybe lose him in the summer. Like maybe you've got to flip him at the deadline again. I mean, maybe James Harden's just going to get traded every 6 months for the rest of his career. I don't know. But so like, what is value? Because I'm starting to thinking through what you said, Mo. Like, what does anybody have? Well, so what do they have to give up? You think about the Miami Heat. You think about the teams that are going to be trying to get Harden. The Clippers, the Knicks might have the most that they could actually offer. If we're saying that,
don't do it. If you're the Knicks, Knicks, just don't do it.
I agree with you.
Don't do it, please. Don't do anything stupid, New York, please. Just especially if this might turn out where there's a non-zero possibility this turns into an Embiid trade demand. This is not James Harden is not the Sixer you need to be going for if you're a Knicks fan.
I just don't know what's going to happen. 24 hours from free agency, and this is like a major turn in the story.
So I'm thinking if you're pivoting from Harden and you don't have a star coming back, I kind of feel like if you can, instead of that, you get, some athletic wings, and then you have Maxey, athletic wings, Tobias Harris surrounding Embiid. I kind of think that's a team that almost makes more sense anyway than like you're like the bet with Embiid and Harden together is that the talent is going to be overwhelming, so it's going to work. Those aren't exactly the most synergistic guys in the league, and so kind of the space around Shaq model, it almost seems like a different but viable plan for Philly to go to. And again, like you're saying, I don't know who that is. Like, is it a 3-team or like again? We're gonna
speculate. I mean, every time you add a team, that's the thing.
No, but
I like Norm Powell though.
It's stuff like is it like stuff goes to Charlotte and Philly gets Bridges in a sign and trade? I mean, something like I don't know what does Charlotte like. I mean, that's a concept that I haven't done run the numbers or anything like that, but like that's a concept that isn't like idiotic. Aside from you deal with the if you're willing to deal with that devil as taking on Bridges.
I mean, it really kind of comes down to though, just how will teams value James Harden? And this is the question that you're asking, and this is really the story behind it, and we're trying to figure out what it is because he's going to be 34 next year. He struggled for a lot more seasons the last few years with injuries and hamstrings and this and that, and it's been problematic for him. He's kind of on the downslope of that. He's still unbelievably talented. Another playoff flameout, for the most part. Like it's one of those things when you're looking at him. One, how do you value him and how does he fit your team? I don't think he fits the Clippers. Okay, now let me own up. I was against the Brooklyn trade. And when those 21 games they were together, they looked unbelievable, right? So maybe I'm just not seeing it, and the Clippers are going to be way better than that. But I just don't see a scenario. I just don't see a great landing spot for him that I go like, okay, that makes sense, and that team's a championship team. I don't see a return. I don't see a return that comes back that goes, okay, and that feels like fair value for Philly to make this trade.
I mean, maybe they want Kyrie Irving in a sign-in trade. No, I'm kidding. There's no way. But I just had the thought in my head, Mo, as you were talking, like just what is like the worst case scenario with the weirdest thing? It would, I think, be James Harden in Dallas next to Luka.
That would
I mean, that would really just everything would. I couldn't watch the Mavericks. It would be over. Okay. That's, I think, enough as of right now. We just don't have any more information. I just wanted to sound that out with you guys. So I appreciate you guys listening. This is on the front end of the show. So now back to our regularly scheduled episode. Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA show. It's actually Thursday because we're going to put this out fast and we're recording Thursday morning. I'm Dave DeFore, joined as I am each and every week by Mo DeKeel and Seth Partnow, and that means this is Nerder. She wrote a little bit out of order on the intro there because I forgot that it was Thursday. I've been thinking Friday. Free agency coming up, guys. New CBA dropped yesterday. Larry Kuhn shot me and Seth an email immediately with the PDF of the document, all 600 some odd pages. And the three of us, we stayed up all night reading it.
By the three of us, they don't mean me because I definitely I'm not reading the CBA. Period. I will read everybody else's synopsis in a one-page memo.
Yeah. Mike Vorkunov over at The Athletic put together a great guide to the CBA, distills it all down, breaks down the important stuff. Shout out to Mike Vorkunov for doing all that work. He's been working on it for weeks. So thanks to him. And obviously Larry Kuhn will have the CBA FAQ updated at some point. So we'll all know what we're talking about eventually. But in the meantime, guys, it sort of feels like every time someone says the words second apron, We need some kind of horror music, and before the show, Mo said it should sound like a castle gate dropping. It definitely is scaring teams away from spending money or having money on the books. But Mo, I think that people are probably taking this the wrong way. It's not about the tax money.
I mean, for some teams, it's about the tax money. Like, there's no question about it, right? There are cheap owners. We know that. We know who you are. We're watching you. But I think it's also the bigger issue is how it handcuffs your team in terms of the moves you can make. Look, you go over it's the second apron, I believe, right? You can't get a buyout guy. How many teams do we know that are over the tax, that are contenders, that are literally waiting for after the trade deadline for the buyout market? Like, that takes them completely out of the running. They can't trade a draft pick 7 years out, right? And we know how we've seen the influx of draft picks being traded and so far out in advance. That pick gets frozen. There are so many different things that it handcuffs a team in terms of, like, okay, how do I get the next guy? How do I make the small improvements besides the vet minimum for guys? And I think that's the scary proposition for teams that are more worried about the team building aspect and the concerns, when it comes to the first and second apron.
I say good to all that. I mean, I think a problem of the current system is like the tax system with the graduated and the luxury tax was meant to sort of compress salaries top to bottom from a team standpoint, so that there wasn't a situation where there's a baseball like situation where the Yankees are spending. I mean, the A's are kind of a special case anyway, but they're spending 10, 50, whatever times as much as another team, because that's not healthy for competitive balance. And it had been kind of ineffective because there were people, there's the Steve Ballmer, there's the Warriors, teams that have these either like wealthy enough owners who don't care or generate enough revenue to not care that, well, crap, we can just okay, we did something wrong, we'll just throw another 40 million at it and get out of the mistake we made. I don't think that's a healthy system. So I think forcing teams to be better planning at not getting themselves into that situation if they want to compete and stay competitive, I think that's good. I think that should offer more ways for kind of the lower teams to raise up, because it's not just this, well, the Clippers are spending $250 million before the tax. Now they're spending how much? How can we compete with that? There's less of that, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things. Like, it's going to highlight smart teams. Look at what Denver did even during the finals of, like, hey, we're going to acquire a couple of draft picks now and be able to kind of add new talent, fresh blood throughout the course of this run that they're building. The Clippers, I'm glad you brought them up, Seth. They just waived Eric Gordon and saved them $110 million because, again, they're trying to get out of the second apron range, because it will handcuff it how they build this team around Kawhi and Paul George, assuming they ever, could stay on the court for more than 20 minutes. I think that's the stuff that you're seeing there. It's going to be weird for a while. We've already seen a massive salary dump with John Collins, right? Going to Utah. Like, we're going to see, there's going to be smart teams. There's going to be some dumb teams with this. There are going to be some teams that are like, screw it, we're looking at Phoenix, that are going all in and just saying, we ain't afraid of the second apron. We're just going to acquire a ton of talent and go from there. And we'll see how all of these kind of things play out. But I think it comes to the most important thing, which, you got to have a plan if you're a team.
Okay, but isn't this going to keep teams from keeping their own homegrown good players? I mean, eventually like, if you have a couple of good drafts in a row, you're going to have to lose guys. Like, I mean, thinking about Minnesota right now, like, look at the situation they're dealing with. Okay, they're going to have OKC is going to have a problem. I mean, Anthony Edwards up in Minnesota, his contract's going to come up. It just feels like it's going to be harder to keep that homegrown talent.
Well, it's going to be harder in that you can't just say to everybody, well, yeah, we'll just give you
get a max.
You get a max and you get a max. And so now, maybe with rookie contracts, maybe teams actually start using the leverage of restricted free agency. Maybe with guys coming up for their third contract, it's not just, Jaylen Brown is sort of a special case because of where Boston is as a team. But, Jaylen Brown is not a good enough player to be worth the 35% supermax. And when it was only money, you just, well, we can't replace him. And now you might actually have to negotiate. You have to actually okay, we would like to keep you around. We can pay you more than anyone else can anyway. But if we go all the way to pay you the supermax, here's all the ways we're hurting the team. Can you work with us here? There's going to have to be more of that, which again is a good thing. Again, the sort of the just max extension here, max contract there. I think that's been poor, lazy team building that's just been anchoring too much to what these like the statutory maximums for level of service are.
I agree with you, Seth, but I also know you disagree with my point here, which is I still think, and I wish in the CBA they at least designated one slot for that. Hey, maybe it doesn't your entire cap, the entire salary doesn't count towards the tax instead of the cap or whatnot, or it doesn't put you in the apron. Like we lament the idea of players stars not staying with their teams the entire career. Like and when I mean we, the collective we, I honestly don't care that much, but like I think that is a mechanism where like, hey, if you've done a great job developing a player and it's your own guy, it's a guy you drafted and everything with that, like there should be a little bit of there should be a reward for developing your best player homegrown talent wise in that sense. And I think that should be a little bit of a tax relief somehow, some way. I don't know how the mechanism works. I think just one slot doesn't have to be 5 slots or for every guy, but I think it give the team a little bit of a help here in terms of retaining their best player that they invested a ton of time into.
I would actually love to see a drafted player discount. Like if you draft a guy and he stayed on your team, I would love to figure that out because I personally don't like the sport where you just root for laundry. I think that having a relationship with the players for the fans is good. I think it's better for the community. There's a lot of reasons. But even if it was just the one spot where like Steph Curry, his contract doesn't fully count toward the cap. I understand what you're coming from. I don't mind that too much. And then another side benefit to this whole thing could be that maybe some of that, and this is a trigger word, maybe some of that max cash starts to trickle down into the middle class a little bit more. Maybe it gets down to some of these role players, and we're going to see like a $20 million contract is going to go to a player, and you're like, what? This guy? Because the salary cap has gone up so much. By the way, 136 million for the 23-24
so
season.
I think we are going to see that, but I think to some degree we're misdiagnosing why. I think the salary floor, the teams are going to have to spend money. So are we going to see some? He got how much? And it maybe we get back to this point where it's now we're getting, well, we got to use this money. So how about you're a $15 million a year player, but we got to spend this money. So here's $50 million for 2 years.
Well, we're going to see that. We're seeing that with Houston, right? Like with the stuff the rumors we're hearing with Houston.
The rumors I'm hearing about like what they're going to offer Fred VanVleet are like
okay.
Outlandish.
We're jumping the gun to free agency here. This is going to be we're just going to let this roll because I like where we're at.
You can't. There's just no way you can't. Like just segment this and then think we're not going to get. It's all. It's affecting us right now.
It's all one thing. Look, but isn't okay? Well, I want to talk about Houston specifically because Houston's being tied to like Fred VanVleet, James Harden, Dylan Brooks. I mean, look. Why would Houston sign these guys? They just have they got 17 first round draft picks in the last 3 years on the roster that all need to play, all need minutes. I mean, are they going to move some guys and just try to do a really fast turnaround? Or is this just they've got a lot of cap space? They're bad. Let's use them for some leverage and try to get more money on the open market.
I'm going to answer your question with a question, Dave. And I only want Dave to answer this, Seth, so don't you respond at all. Who owns the team?
I know. It's Tillman time, guys.
He's just listen, he's been too quiet. Mr. Shut Up and Listen has been too quiet and is dying probably for action. And let's go. And this team's been bad. And this is, which hurts the gate, which hurts everything that comes with it and relevance. And I think that matters to him. And I think instead of properly building, He's going to throw, and it's not going to be painful in the sense of just, hey, a massive 2-year deal for Fred VanVleet, which is massive and overpaying for him for sure. But it's just 2 years, right? Like for them, it's something that they won't feel too painful out of it in the long run in terms of that stuff. It's going to hurt with developing the young guys and things like that, but they're going to sell them on the idea of like, oh, his leadership is going to be a thing and it's going to matter and he's going to help, like all of this stuff. I mean, it's just, hey, they want to be relevant and that's the only way they think they could do it. And I think that's what matters.
It's a huge mistake.
Oh, yes.
Huge mistake.
Yes. Yes. But they're not.
It's an
owner who's trying to push the thing.
But let's play this out with me, guys. All right, let's say they do this. Let's say they get James Harden. They sign VanVleet. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at their cap sheet because they're not a realistic possibility to me.
Either or.
What do you do? So what do you do there? You just bring that guy in. You raise your floor a little bit, which is bad, actually. When you're not going to do anything, it's not like this would be a playoff team. Adding Fred VanVleet doesn't make them good enough to make the playoffs. Even if Alperen Sengun is 7 feet tall and baby Jokic.
You're forgetting about Dylan Brooks, though, Dave.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Dylan Brooks.
Dylan Brooks, the guy that the dynasty begins after. You bring him in. I just don't. It doesn't really make your team better. Not really. What do you win?
We didn't say it was a good plan. We just said it was a plan.
And you could see why it's happening.
It's dumb. Would they then package younger players to try to get, I don't know, disgruntled veterans?
You're applying
like they missed out on Bradley Beal already. Right. Okay. So anyway, Houston has a problem.
I mean, let's talk. Also, like Ime Udoka didn't sign up for this job to be a rebuilding job. He didn't take this job.
Well, I think Ime Udoka didn't realize that there were going to be so many way better jobs available when he took that job. So,
maybe why he should have waited, but like that's on him. But I don't think that's also part of it too. And again, they're putting a lot of pressure on him and a lot of pressure on the free agents to come in to change the culture in 1 or 2 years. That's hard to do. And that's going to be the challenge with that stuff. And I think you're going to see some of these young guys available, Dave. I think you're going to see them tweak the roster as they go through the course of the season. And yeah, it's going to hurt them in that sense. And a smart team's probably going to take advantage of them.
Well, that's a great place for us to start discussing free agency a little bit. Really, it's more of an off-season discussion. And there are teams every single year, and we talk about organizational synergy quite a bit, alignment, top-down alignment. Having a plan is important. You ever try to make something, guys? You ever build like, a workbench or anything like that? Well, try doing it with no plans. Try doing that with no plans, guys. Now, I've done that without a plan because I just needed something quick. It wasn't level. Things were falling apart. It really wasn't all that stable. It got the job done. So you can build a basketball team with no plan. You're not going to win games. You're not going to have balance on both sides of the court. So I want to talk a little bit about game planning, the offseason.
And about the Phoenix Suns.
well, wait. See, this is the thing, though. I actually think the Suns have a plan. Their plan was to blow past the second apron, try to get as much top-end talent as you can. And now they're going to bring in 65 free agents that they hopefully can sign to minimum contracts. That we've seen that work a million times, haven't we?
Yeah, we haven't seen a team last year have to reboot their entire roster after trying and failing at that exact plan for 3 years.
Yeah. So when you're looking around right now, okay, I think Utah so far, it's pretty obvious Utah has a plan. I mean, they're trying to get a ton of young talent, which they got 3 picks in the first round this year. I actually think they had a great draft. They get John Collins essentially on a rehab assignment. Remember, he had a wrist injury last year. I think that was a large reason why he had such a down. Excuse me, it was a finger. Thanks, Seth. I think that's a reason why he had such a down year last year was the injury. And not to mention Trae Young, as we've talked about, not the easiest guy to play with historically. John Collins been on the block since he signed that last contract, so he's getting a fresh start. Yeah, that's true. It was before. So he's getting a fresh start in a place where he's going to get time. Utah's going to be interesting next year. I don't think they're going to be good necessarily, but they're going to be interesting. So I like what they've done so far. Anybody stand out to you guys, good or bad, in what you've seen so far? Now, let's not go into necessarily what we've heard about the future, but like what you've seen so far, the way they've lined things up. Anybody stand out to you guys?
Can we, before we get into specific teams, can we just a dynamic that I think Utah is emphasizing? I think that with the extension rules as they've changed in the last two CBAs, I think part of the reason there's going to be some silly money thrown around this offseason is the free agency class isn't that great because most of the best players already signed extensions because you can sign extensions, even the guys like Vucevic signing an extension right before free agency. So there's not a lot of guys to spend money on. So we might start to see more teams pre-spend their free agency money by trading for guys. And if you told me you can if you went out and signed John Collins for 3 years and $75 million and basically added him for free, would you be upset with that? Oh, maybe you say, well, maybe I would have liked to pay him closer to 20, but you pay a little extra to get your guy. If you look at it that way, like it's a great free agency move for Utah. Just adding talent for free tends to be good.
Well, and we talk all the time about teams like Utah and how they have to work on those margins because it's not like, Fred VanVleet maybe would sign in Utah. James Harden's not. Kyrie Irving's not.
John Collins wouldn't. Like, let's just be
that's fair. That's fair. That's like,
it's a great opportunity for him, but that's probably not going to be on the top of the list of cities that he'd want to go to. In that sense, no offense to Utah, but you guys are cold. The whole thing there though is I don't think when we talk about free agency, I like what you were saying earlier, Dave. It's off season. This is going to be a heavy trade offseason more than signings. Because again, the free agency class is not, again, we're talking about Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks. Like,
I saw a thing that was like Kyle Kuzma could totally change our summer.
Right. Like that's the names we're talking about. This isn't the year where it's Kawhi, PG's possible, all of it's not that type of year in the signings and all these different opportunities. So I think that's an important thing to watch for this offseason. But in terms of what Utah was just really smart. This is the guy they've been trying to trade for like a year and a half, and Atlanta was really dumb. And what I mean by that is in the time that they were trying to trade for him, the value got lower and lower and lower for him. And then it just turned into a salary dump in that situation. That's the thing that's the mistake teams make sometimes is waiting too long to make the move. And I think, we've joked about how long he's been on the trade block, and it's kind of been a thing there. And that's why when he got traded, it was, he finally got traded. But Atlanta shot themselves in the foot because of that. And I think that's the important thing to watch forward there. I love what Utah did. That Jordan Clarkson kind of picking up his option because they need a guard and kind of keep that going there. They probably need to find one more guard if they can, and we'll see what happens for them in free agency as that clock turns, although everybody's negotiating and tampering right as we speak, Dave. And I think, it's just a good move from Utah. Utah's showing themselves to be a very smart front office for how they're attacking and how they're going forward.
And by the way, Danny Ainge drafting Bryce Sensabaugh is exactly in line with everything I know and believe about Danny Ainge.
Your new Danny Green.
As a talent evaluator, because Bryce Sensabaugh is he is just a strong guard who can really shoot. If that knee works, I'm telling you, man, I like what Utah did. And speaking of, I was thinking to myself, if Utah just wants to flip this thing around, why wouldn't they call up Portland, a team that I don't know if they have a plan, and just say, hey, Portland, what would it take to get Dame here to Utah?
No, no.
Too much too soon.
No, but it's just like, that just doesn't make sense to me for them in that sense. Like, I don't think that makes them a championship team. I don't think that you have a good group right now of young guys and stuff like that. Continue to build. And you're going to be a team that's going to be right on the level of the rise. Look at the teams that I think we feel very confident about their futures. A lot of them have all built up there. And, we're going to kind of get to the good old Portland Trailblazers if we want me to just go now.
That's what I was trying.
You're trying to get me there.
Yes.
But I mean, like I think the Blazers plan of two timelines might be the dumbest freaking thing going on in the NBA right now. Short of a team not having a plan, we just saw a better organization try that and failed. And now you're going to say, okay, first off, let's just talk about it this way. You draft Scoot Henderson, which I agree was the pick. I liked it. I like that they kept it. That's who they should have drafted at that point. I think they're better off with him than with Brandon Miller. I think we're going to have another small backcourt situation there between those guys. We're just continuing to load up on small guards that probably can't defend. And I think it's just like, what are we doing here in this instance? You got to sign Jeremy Grant to a massive contract, or if you lose him, now you're really in trouble. But for them to have this meeting and come out going like, we're going to build a contender around Dame. When? You've been trying to build this contender around Dame forever. It's not working. And now you're going to try to thread the needle of 2 timelines. You're not a good enough organization right now. Hand this thing over to the kids. Trade Dame, get as much as you possibly can for Dame. Don't make the mistake Atlanta Hawks made with John Collins. It won't be a salary dump, but don't wait too long. You got to make this move now and strike right now while there's a lot of interest and go. And you know what? And here's the other thing. As much as we always talk about Dame deserves the right to decide where he goes, no, trade him where you can get the best possible stuff for him. And I think that matters there for that in that regard. And I think this is a team that's going, this 2 timeline plan might be the dumbest thing for this organization to do.
So I think that I don't want to go too far on killing the Blazers insofar as I think there's at least a chance that the difference between sort of what they're saying as they're playing their poker hand and what they're actually thinking. Like, the most powerful bit of leverage a team trading a star has usually is no. You make your best offer. It's like, no, that's not good enough. We won't. So they are trying and probably failing to build up credibility for whoever's going to try to trade Dame, that you better come with something good because we're not just taking scraps, because we're fine going and building around it. Like, you're not buying it. I'm not buying it. But I think we recognizing that, it's worth trying. If they get an extra first round pick out of like another team finding it credible that they're fine going into the season this way, even though you and I and Dave all think they shouldn't. So I do think let's see what they actually do before we the messaging game is in full flight this time of year anyway, and it's easy to get caught up in that and just remember it's like the message and the truth are often.
I get that. But this is also an organization that doesn't have that credibility because this is how many times have we heard? We're content building around Dame. How many times? We've heard it for years. So it's not like, so I will continue with the history that they've had, which is they are really thinking they can build around Dame at this point when they fail to do it over and over again. And yes, this is a new regime that's only been there 2 years at this point, or a year and a half. So it's not like they've had a massive amount of time. But let's just talk about the big move they made was they traded CJ McCollum, and lo and behold, they still have a poor defensive backcourt. It's like they continue to do the same damn stuff over and over.
So let's trade Dame for Tyler Hero.
Yeah, listen, no, I mean, Miami might not be the best place for them. It's going to be the best place for Dame, but it might not be the best place for them, and they might have to turn to Dame, going like, "Yo, we can't send you to Miami for that offer." That just doesn't help us.
I mean, it's just tough, man. It's a huge contract. So just the money part of it is hard, much less the fit in other places.
That gets us back around to, again, I think teams have always got themselves in trouble by not thinking far enough ahead in terms of what does this look like 3 years down the road when the decisions come due then. And that's in part why Atlanta had dumped John Collins, because it's like, we're trying to build a team, but we're not going into the tax for this team, maybe any team, who knows. Again, whatever they're going to message, I'll believe they'll go to the tax when I see it. But they had to do the same thing last year with Kevin Huerter, because the organizational alignment of realizing we are not going to pay this did not factor enough in their decision making up to that point, because they just kind of kept everybody and rolled it over and didn't do anything, and then they found themselves in a spot they had to dump. So the new mechanisms are possibly crystallizing the importance with teams that's like, oh shit, we got to think about this more, because we can't come up in a situation where in next trade deadline we got to dump guys for nothing to get under that second apron. So we got to make moves now. We got to sign contracts now that don't put us in that situation. And if teams start operating that way, I think that's good.
Yeah, but they won't. They won't.
A
good number of teams
I know
are going to be shiny lights. Let's go sign Fred VanVleet 2 years, 80 billion.
The VanVleet contract is absolutely going to destroy my brain.
But you know what? Again, you could see this coming from Houston. I literally was texting friends last night who were shocked by that. I go no, Houston's going to do something crazy dumb for short-term deals. You can just see it from Tillman. And we're back at Houston, and I don't want to go back to them again. I want to talk about the Bulls.
Oh, I was just about to say, let's talk about the Bulls, because they've kind of, this has been a rough hand dealt to them. The Lonzo Ball injury really kind of threw them off track. We all agreed we liked what they did when they got Lonzo and Alex Caruso. I thought it was,
but not the other stuff they did when they did so.
I mean, listen, they at least you could see what they were trying to do, right? Like they actually did have a little bit of a plan. They had high-level defensive guards who were also offensive connectors to go with DeMar DeRozan and Vooch, who was going to provide your offense, and then they try to fill in defense around it. That vision, I mean, that's basketball. I don't know what they're doing now. I mean, at this point, the Lonzo injury is sad for us, especially because, this show, I feel like we've been all over those kind of guys. I mean, those connector guys are our favorites. But to bring back Vooch now, we're just kicking the can down the road.
That's a great salary to trade for DeAndre Ayton in 6 months.
Yeah,
so
that's by the way, if you're
toss that out there.
I'm Phoenix, I'm still not doing that. But and you guys know how much I love DeAndre Ayton. I think the Bulls are a great example of what happens when dreams don't come true. I think that's the honest truth about it. And they had a nice run, injuries derailed them. And then, it's sad in that sense. And now they're stuck with the aftermath of how do we get out of this? You're paying Zach LaVine. I think what's he owed? 173 still left on his contract. You're hoping you're going to be able to trade him. I don't know if anybody's really going to jump at that. You're looking at, what are you going to do with DeMar DeRozan, who's up for an extension? You signed Vooch to a deal that made sense for both sides, but let's just be honest, on the basketball court, does it make a lot of sense for your team? And now you're going to bring back guards and everything. I imagine Kobe White and Dosunmu are both coming back. They're just in a tough spot where they're going to end up running this back, and none of us are going to believe in this team. What are they at best? A first-round exit?
They're a play-in team.
Right. But their ceiling would be first-round exit even. I think their floor is lottery. And I think, this all comes back to I understood it. I didn't like it, but the Vooch trade was rough, man. That was a high price to pay. Wendell Carter Jr. and 2 picks. Now, granted, Jet Howard being one of those picks is pretty interesting, but there are a lot of other people on the board that could have helped the Bulls at that point. And I think that's the deal there. They swung and missed, even though, and now they have to regroup and come up with a plan. I don't know what they do, Dave. Who's taking Zach LaVine's contract?
I think that there's probably a market for Zach LaVine, but
if it was the old Knicks regime, then they would be jumping at LaVine. But I don't know if there's much of a market for him. Not at that contract. And again, with this CBA coming through, because how much does he help you?
LaVine might be a guy. That's actually a perfect example of how that second apron, Seth, is going to affect, because Zach LaVine is the type of guy that a team would say, hey, you know what? We're close. Can we get this guy? And we'll deal with the tax ramifications for a little bit. But when you get into that second apron, it is more than just the tax. It is you are handcuffed. Kevin Love was a buyout guy, played big minutes throughout the playoffs for the Miami Heat. And I know that's rare, but if you're in that second apron, you just can't sign that guy, even if he's available.
Yeah, it's with LaVine. It's balance also the health. I think the Zach LaVine situation is if it's not like he could be, he's probably athletically declining and might be a 60 game a year player, and you can't count on him to be healthy in the playoffs. That certainly has as much of an impact on kind of where he's perceived as a second A project. But the larger point is well taken. It's just LaVine might not be the perfect example of it, because I think he's someone who would have struggled to find value under the old system, just because it's like, well, you want us to spend how much on a guy who might play 40 games next year?
So are we going to do a Paul George, Zach LaVine trade? Like, we'll trade you your problem for our problem.
I mean, but then Chicago basically has the same problem, because Paul George isn't getting him out.
I said we're going to trade your problem for our problem and hope it works. It's the equivalent of, hey, let's have a baby. Our marriage isn't working out.
Yeah. You guys got anything else before we go? I mean, this is, we kind of are now in the let's see what happens in free agency, and obviously we'll be doing shows all summer. But
I think there are a lot more interesting teams out there. I think nobody's talking about Orlando. I think Orlando's an interesting spot if they could find a guard. I think Sacramento cleared a ton of cap space. I'm not on this as we're getting Draymond Green, but they might just re-sign everybody, so it might be boring. Yeah. But I kind of want to see if they go take a swing, and I got a guy I want them to take a swing at. And it's not Kyle Kuzma. Go after Jeremy Grant.
That's interesting. As sort of the Harrison Barnes replacement, Jeremy Grant. But the issue the one issue I have is Jeremy Grant would be a lot more expensive than what I think Harrison Barnes will get.
Yeah, but I think he's better.
How much better is Jeremy Grant than Kyle Kuzma? Anyway, that's not what I want to talk about.
We'd be splitting hairs all day if we're trying to figure out. Yeah, but I don't hate that, Mo.
Do we have enough time to? We haven't talked about it since it happened.
Podcast. There's no rules.
One of the contenders made a pretty big revamp of their entire kind of roster culture, whatever. And I kind of wanted. I don't think we've talked about it. Is what do we think about Porzingis to Boston? Do we have time to chat about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to go Chris Paul to the Warriors.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah. I was like, it's culture change. I think the Porzingis move from Boston is worth us talking about. I mean, we haven't gotten a chance to do it yet. Number one, I mean, he had a really good year last year. He played in a team that nobody really watched, but I mean, he definitely had a good year last year. His rim protection next to Robert Williams, it might actually make Boston's defense even scarier if he can stay on the court. My issues are going to be the other end, and I think Mo, you probably agree with me there. He likes to jack up threes, man. That's really what his game is going to be, and that is the biggest problem I have with the Boston Celtics and their offense is that over-reliance on the three. They just can't score in a variety of ways. They only really have one way to beat you. And I think he leans further into that.
This was a very weird trade to sort of watch the discussion around, because usually you see it when a team makes a trade, like the fans of that team are like, we did great. And everyone else is like, I don't know. And this one was like, everyone else is, wow, the Celtics did great. And Boston fans were like, oh, I hate it. And it seemed like a lot of it was based on sort of the affection, understandable, but the affection for Marcus Smart. This is a team that we've talked about a bunch that has been a late game meltdown waiting to happen for years and years. And for the complaint that they kind of changed their culture and lost one of their culture setters, are we sure that's a bad thing?
I think sometimes we put too much value on Marcus Smart in that regard. Of course, I did the exact opposite when I talked about him in Memphis, but I think, just different situations. But I think in terms of his cultural importance on that team in the long run, I think, I did yell at Jay King on BasketBuzz. I'm not sure if you caught that, where he would, I think Marcus Smart, a team that lacks toughness, and if he's your toughest guy, that's you're having problems, because I think he's a fake tough guy in the long run of things. But I think their issues are, it's what Dave says, and this would have been the issue if they had Marcus Smart or Porzingis. Their offensive shot profile sucks. and they need to change their offensive philosophy. I don't think Porzingis does that. Now, if they can go find another guard, I was kind of secretly rooting for them to get Chris Paul. I thought Chris Paul would have been good for them in their buyout situation. I thought that would have been a good spot to just, hey, I'm going to get you guys into offense and get you better shots and better opportunities. And I don't think that's something that we're going to see all that much with the guys they have. Derek White was good. Let's see if he can do it again, but I don't know if that's enough in terms of being able to get everybody again into their spots. And they're just too dependent on the threes, man. And, the idea Porzingis is going to punish switches. I think he's going to float around the 3-point line more than not. And I think that's going to be a problem for them. And I think that's going to be an issue for them going forward. It is a seismic change, though. And considering they went from trading Brogdon and who was else in that trade before the Clippers blew it up?
I think it was just Brogdon, right?
Okay.
I think Brogdon was the only piece moving.
Gallinari, but that's just the money.
Right. That's the other name in my mind. Okay. But they thought they were getting, if they had Porzingis and Smart, I would have felt much better about it.
Yeah. I do think that this team needs playmaking. They need to get somebody so I actually kind of agree with you on the Chris Paul, at least, functionally. And Marcus Smart was one of their better playmakers. So they actually took a step back in the playmaking department. Now, ultimately, I think maybe their defense is going to be better because of Porzingis and his rim protection. And now Al Horford's not going to have to play the minutes load. Same with Rob Williams, right? You're going to be able to play a center at all times with none of your guys having to play 35, 36, 38 minutes to get through the regular season. I think that there's a lot of value there. As we know, playing a traditional drop sort of coverage regular season gets you to the playoffs usually a little bit easier than the higher leverage stuff that we see from Boston once they get to the playoffs. But I do worry offensively. Where do they go when they don't have anything going, which they often don't? Where do they go? And it's going to be Porzingis jacking a 30-footer. And that's the release valve for them.
So I guess the final point on this that I'll make is that I think that doesn't change the underlying dynamic. Is if they get 90%, the 90% version of Jason Tatum, 96, 97, 98% of the time, instead of 90% of the time, that's what they need. And that hasn't changed from before to now. So it maybe removes the appearance of training wheels that didn't actually exist, because the playmaking thing, the ball's going to be in Brown and Tatum's hands at the end of games, no matter what. Right. Preferably Tatum's, given that I don't think any of us expect a lot of ball handling development from Jaylen Brown at this point in his career. But yeah.
Let's talk about Chris Paul to the Warriors. Reports starting to come out that he might start, which, come on, that doesn't make any sense. Come on, guys. This is summer. People just need stuff to talk about. Chris Paul's probably not going to start. I mean, maybe he does here and there if Steph Curry has to miss some time or something, but what does it look like on the court? Is Chris Paul going to come in and change, or is it going to be just like every other star player as he gets older? He's going to keep doing the same thing. Is he going to be running pick and roll with second units for the Warriors, pounding the leather off the ball, getting them organized, which is something that they needed? Is that the plan for Chris Paul? I don't think, is he going to close games? That doesn't make any sense. They'd be too small.
I think them getting competent second unit offense is a pretty massive improvement for them. Them going into the season again, where they're 18 points per 100 better with Steph on the floor. That's just not sustainable. I think we've seen this several times in the last, couple of years, where they get to the end of the season, they get to the end of playoff games, get to the end of playoff series, and the offense has been Steph, and he's tired. I mean, he was tired. He was tired at the end of the Lakers series a couple of years ago when they lost in the play, and he was tired at the end of the play game against Memphis. They were able to balance that a little bit in the championship year, in part because they got better minutes from Jordan Poole, in part because they had some more of the sort of the high level role players that they didn't have last year. But just being able to, over the course of the season, Steph only has to play 32 minutes tonight, because those other 16 minutes, it's going to be fine. It's Chris Paul pounding the leather off the ball. But our offense is still competent. And also it's really slow, so there's fewer possessions anyway.
I honestly, I think this is actually going to be huge for Klay Thompson. He's actually going to have a pass first point guard getting him shots, which is so drastically different than what he had with Jordan Poole in that second unit. And I think that, and it's more in the second unit time, obviously. Listen, if they start Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Wiggins, and Draymond Green, I hate it. I hate it. Like I will be coming on this show every week screaming and kicking and being all upset about it. But if they're going to use him in that Kyle Lowry type role, 20 to 24 minutes a game, him kind of really manning and taking ownership of that second unit, I think it opens the door for them a ton. And I think that's going to be really interesting for them. And I think that's going to be really dangerous for other teams. You mean they're going to run pick and roll and Klay Thompson's running off screens on the weak side? All right, that's a tough deal to defend. He even does it on the time when he's going to share court time with Curry for sure. But okay, we're going to do that with Curry? Like, Jesus. Like, good luck defensively. Like, the panic levels you're going to have defensively on all of those things. I think it has a chance to be really interesting. I'm excited to watch that team.
It could wind up, I mean, we'll see if he's there, but could be huge for Jonathan Kuminga also. In second units, like him and Chris Paul running pick and roll, that's a thing. I mean, I think that especially you play him with Klay Thompson coming off screens. Do you guys put any credence to the idea that this is like another sort of D'Angelo Russell situation where they got Chris Paul, got that contract on the books with the intention that by the trade deadline, they'll be able to flip it?
No.
Okay. I don't think D'Angelo Russell was that situation. I think that's like a retcon of what was a bad move at the time that they bank shot.
Well, you got to have the money on the books, though. See, that's the thing. See, this is where the cap machinations come into play, right?
Yeah,
you got to have that contract so you can move it for the other contract and you attach the assets. So
we made this bad deal.
I will give them credit.
Good deal in the future.
Well, it's more just like we got to keep the books up.
No, but I think it was smarter for them in the sense of like, hey, after this year, if it doesn't work out, we can just waive Chris Paul. It's an unguaranteed contract. And then they got out of that ridiculous Poole contract. Like, just that alone would have been worth it for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, we await free agency with bated breath. I'm sure Fred VanVleet is going to, I don't know. Where's the wildest place he could sign, guys?
Houston for 2 years, $800 million.
I mean, listen, man, I'm rooting for the Orlando Magic. If the Orlando Magic can get a decent guard, a decent lead guard, somebody to get these guys all organized or whatever, that's a play-in team. That's what we're rooting for. We're rooting for the Orlando Magic, right?
Should they get Dame?
Should they get Chris Paul?
Chris has already got a home. Stop it, Seth. He's happy.
Okay,
he's happy. But Dame needs one.
That's an interesting one. All right, let's wrap it up. For Seth and Mo, I'm Dave, and this has been Nerder, She Wrote, on the Athletic NBA Show.